All right, we we are live. Welcome, everybody. You are watching Capital Gains. My name is Julian Fahrer, and with me, as always, never missing a beat. Not even when he's on the other side of the world, live from Hong Kong. The man himself, Mr. Frank Corva. Thank you
Let's
for
go.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for interrupting perhaps some post conference celebrations. Even I know there are many demands on your time, so grateful for you to be here once again. But Frank, how's it going? And where have you just come from?
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, Julian. I just came from an after party. We just finished up at Bitcoin Asia 2025, the largest Bitcoin conference outside of America in history, which is super cool. Also, I apologize if there's any audio delay here or visual delay. Apologies to the audience. We're doing the best we can with internet here in the hotel, so we're just making it work. So just stick with us if you don't mind. But yes, Bitcoin Asia 2025, exciting times. Was with the president of the United States' son earlier, backstage in the deep, watching him talk about things. Also on the main stage of the conference, talking about things. We had CZ talking about things, and those things revolved around policy. The United States sort of setting the pace when it comes to regulation in the Bitcoin and crypto space. Lots of people in Asia paying attention, and it looks like it will have some effect on the world. But happy to be here. Happy to be. Love this sort of reporting from wherever I'm at, making this sort of documenting it. Getting to have this experience and to share it. And I was on the live desk for a few hours each day, or about 5 or 6 hours each day for the last 2 days. So my voice is a little bit raspy as well. But I appreciate all of the of you guys sticking with us, and we'll do the best we can to run through the news this week.
Yeah, not rasp. I would say it sounds like a kind of sophisticated, weathered, kind of soft, gravelly tones. So it sounds like you've been hard at work. Well, obviously, heaps to talk about just from the conference itself, and the rest of the news is the rest of the week's news too. Why don't we start? Let's start with the man you just mentioned, Mr.
Yeah.
Eric Trump, son of the Donald, who was in attendance in Hong Kong, had a bit to say, including, I suppose, this headline appropriately grabbed by folks at Bitcoin Magazine about BTC hitting $1 million one day, but had much more to say about other than that too. So, I guess Frank, your take on the entirety of Eric Trump's talk that just happened recently, and what were some of the takeaways for you?
Yeah. So Eric, yeah, I saw him speak on stage and also in a smaller kind of private setting with a friend of mine interviewed him backstage, and we were there for that as well. Eric, I think out of everybody in the Trump family, including Trump himself, President Trump, and Don Jr., um, seems to, I think, get Bitcoin the most. Made a lot of, even understands the history to a degree. Talked about China, the region, people having mined here. Mining was huge. Bitcoin, for those who don't know, I think probably many people listening do, but a lot of Bitcoin mining happened in China before it was banned, and then unbanned, and then banned, and then unbanned, and all that stuff many times. Um, but Eric, I think, really gets it. He likes to harp on his family having been debanked and all that stuff, and that's why he came to cryptocurrency. But generally speaking, if I had to guess, he gets it. Uh, how can I put it? Um, he gets it more than a lot of people, and I think that there was a certain feeling in the room of him being here talking about this at a conference this big in this room with, I think we had about 17,000 people in attendance. Sort of sends a message beyond what the United States has done with regulation, beyond the embrace, President Trump's embrace of the industry. His talking about American BTC and all the stuff he's working on in the space. It was more powerful than I thought it might be. It was just interesting to see him there and to see people's reactions to him. And also, I think worth mentioning CZ talking very favorably about the steps the U.S. has taken, how fast the Trump administration has moved. And again, CZ is like an absolute legend in Asia. I think he has like 10 million followers on X or something. So CZ speaking about, what's happening in the United States and how Asia will sort of has to respond, respond with favorable policy. Hong Kong, a special, I forget what it's called, a special economic zone or autonomous region economic. I forget what it is, but long history of sort of economic freedoms here. I think that one of the bigger pieces of progress we've seen out of Hong Kong has been a piece of stablecoin legislation. I don't know if they'll be issuing Hong Kong dollars on the blockchain or something along those lines, or making it easier for companies to do so. But I will say one thing that's really cool. Walking around the streets here, I see lots of Bitcoin ATMs, Bitcoin accepted in certain places. So that was kind of a vibe, cool backdrop to the conference. Again, the conference was predominantly dominated by treasury company talk. No shortage of treasury company talk for sure. But at the same time, there were definitely a few cool discussion, technical talks at the live desk. We had a bunch of cool people who were doing cool stuff around the world, using Bitcoin as money and all that kind of stuff. So it was a nice mix of people. And again, just this whole sort of U.S. setting the pace, and Asia, Asia will respond. I guess if I could sum it up in 3 words, it would be that. That seemed to be the vibe, especially from a lot of the people who I spoke with, who are either operating treasury companies here or other sorts of Bitcoin companies here. They're feeling kind of bullish, and it seems like they're not just sort of saying it on camera, but they're genuinely feeling like, look, we know that we sort of have to, we got to get it together and move our industry forward in our country as well, whether that's Korea or India or here in Hong Kong and China. So yeah, we'll see what comes next.
Great. Yeah. I think CZ said something, I think as you mentioned there, he mentioned other countries following suit, or following the lead of the United States and the Trump administration in particular.
Yep.
Any indications or even any theories from you about what that might mean? It could be strategic Bitcoin reserves. It could just be introducing some of the types of legislation we've seen here that either structure markets or protect devs or do all kinds of things. Any thoughts on what he might be meaning there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. Does he mean protect devs? Probably not. Does he mean SBRs? Probably. If I had to guess, there's plenty of countries in Asia and the Middle East that are already stacking, and we don't necessarily know about that, or they have been stacking, or they're mining with their own electricity, whatever it is. I'm sure there's a lot of that going on. It wouldn't surprise me if there were other stories, along the lines of something like Bhutan, which has mined upwards of like 13,000 Bitcoin. Yeah, I think it's that, but also I think there was a lot of very clear, explicit talk of Bitcoin as a store of value, as a capital asset, that kind of stuff. It was very much a very financial, we didn't have CZ up there talking about how Bitcoin's going to become the world's money anytime soon, but I think he did talk about it as the world's, I think he called the world reserve currency. He wasn't necessarily referring to it as like, or highlighting it as peer-to-peer cash, but did talk about it like that, with even Eric Trump talking about, I think, it going to 1 million and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty bullish talk. And I have to believe that the Eric Trumps sort of know what Bitcoin at 1 million means. Obviously, an asset that's that liquid, that's that permissionless. In the back of my mind, I'm sort of like, it's kind of a statement in and of itself, just for him to make that sort of price prediction, because we know a whole host of other factors would probably start to come true if Bitcoin becomes that liquid. So
yeah, well, I think we can say 2 things about Eric Trump. One is he has a personal stake in that statement being true. And
correct.
2 is he has probably more information than most people in the world have about the likelihood of that happening.
Totally.
For policy, or being influenced by policy-related reasons too.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to what I think might be the biggest story of the week otherwise, which is this looming battle between Donald Trump and broadly the Federal Reserve, and then specifically Fed member Lisa Cook, who he has now fired, or at least he thinks he has. And there are a few moving pieces here. She's filed a lawsuit against him. I guess somewhat breaking news just this morning is his team has then filed in response to that lawsuit. So there's a few things to break down with this story, because I think, as we alluded to last week, this touches on this big idea of Fed independence as such. How is the Fed independent? Why is it independent? And on what basis can we even make that claim? Is it in law? Is it kind of normative? Other things going on. But before we dig into all of that, I pulled up this article from Axios about it. And this was prior to some of the other news coming out. But the reason I pulled this up is it's got, or at least it had, when I could see it, had a few quotes from Democratic lawmakers kind of in response to this news. The key takeaways there are, perhaps unsurprisingly, but they have called this essentially an authoritarian attack on the independence of the Fed. That's the kind of the line that they're going with. Not a huge surprise there. I suppose It's the natural thing to say. However, I did note that one of the vocal Democrat lawmakers was none other than our friend Elizabeth Warren.
Okay.
What's funny about this is she, of course, herself, I think probably prior to the Trump administration, but she somewhat strikingly, if this is last year or the year before, herself wrote a letter, I think, to Jerome Powell about the necessity of lowering interest rates too. So this is a very partisan issue. There's a lot of legal stuff to dig into here, and as a kind of bit of a jurisprudence nerd, I'm kind of excited to see what happens in terms of clarifying the law around Fed independence. But even aside from that, it's just a highly politically charged story right now.
Yeah.
So I suppose, we'll talk about the politics of it. What I would like to do is just spend a couple of minutes explaining legally, at least right now, as this is unfolding, what's going on. And so what happened yesterday was that, I suppose for folks who aren't quite aware, to rewind to somewhat closer to the beginning of this saga, Donald Trump has either attempted or has now fired Fed board member Lisa Cook for alleged mortgage fraud. We touched on this last week. She has herself at least a couple of residential real estate properties. And the allegation here is she's claimed multiple properties as a primary residence, which you can't do for tax reasons and other things too. So on that basis, Donald Trump has then he's fired her, subject to the Federal Reserve Act, which is the piece of legislation that kind of instantiates the Federal Reserve in the first place and then sets out the one sole way in which the president has the power to remove board members, which is, I think we touched on this last time too, quote, for cause. So he needs to find a cause to do this. The thing about for cause, as we touched on as well, is that there's never been a real challenge to the meaning of this because it's never been attempted before until now. And so Trump has attempted to fired her for cause. Now, Lisa Cook's, there we go. This is the kind of the section of the Federal Reserve Act where that's in there. So Cook's argument is basically that there is in fact a kind of a precedent for this for cause test. This is a legal test, and that the definition of it, as has been established in some case law, is quote, inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. So her case is, what the Fed, Trump can fire me if I've done something wrong in office, if I've misrepresented myself in the course of, I don't know, being a part of the interest rate setting process and all the other things that the Fed does.
Right.
But the mortgage fraud stuff, that's private. That's in my private life. It's outside of office, and so it kind of escapes the jurisdiction of the Federal Reserve Act.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the nuts and bolts of her case. Of course, this being a very political case, much of her motion relates to the political nature, her team's allegations of the true political motivations of Trump behind this whole thing. So what she has said is that, look, the president wants interest rates lowered. That's what he wants. He's spoken about it publicly. He's come after Jerome Powell for this, and now him and Bill Pulte and other people are coming after me as well. Basically, this is a way to leverage the Fed to lower interest rates, and then in her words, this amounts to quote policy disagreements. So again, that's and again, this is the argument. Policy disagreements is not kind of captured within this for cause test, this legal test. So what does she want? She wants basically the court to say, hey, Trump can't fire me. And also the kind of relief she's seeking is that there's this clarity now on what for cause means, in her words, relating to inefficiency, neglect of duty, or something she's done in office. And that, again, in her words, unsubstantiated, I think I put a typo in there, but unsubstantiated mortgage fraud allegations, that's just not within the bounds of what we're talking about here. Now, as of just this morning, this is to kind of, I guess, wrap up the purely legal side of this, Trump has filed a response to that argument. Now, again, can't go through all 20-odd pages of it, but the TLDR of it is two things. Number one, he said that the for-cause power certainly is broad enough to include her mortgage fraud, or her alleged mortgage fraud, and that there's, his lawyers have found some case law to attest to that to argument. But there's also, I think, what is a little bit more arcane, but I think maybe more interesting, is this procedural point that he's making as well. What his team is saying is that this for-cause power is actually not subject to judicial review. This is not the kind of thing that you can go and go to the Supreme Court on and adjudicate, has he used this power correctly? So we're really now getting into a bit of a fault line or kind of fuzziness in terms of separating powers here, not just between the executive and the Fed, and it's not even right to call that separation of powers. As I said last week, it's not a branch of government, but there is a question of how the scope of the president's power there, obviously, but more this balanced question, I think, is between now potentially the executive and the judicial branch. He's basically saying this is a broad presidential power, and the court has no right to rule over it. So it's setting up, I think, a really interesting contest for the very first time. It goes to, as I said, it goes to the heart of this almost a meme, right? About like Fed independence. Oh, the Fed's independent. They're independent. They're independent. They do what they want, and they're beyond the reach of popularly elected politicians and maybe democracy as such. Now, I'm not really a lawyer. It's certainly not my area of expertise. I don't know what's going to happen with this case. Yeah. My gut says Trump's argument is the stronger one, either on the procedural argument or on the substantive one. It would surprise me. It would surprise me firstly if the court took this up, really, for legal reasons. Although I guess you never know. Anything could happen now. But it seems to me like he's got the stronger argument. I guess I'll say that. But I kind of curiously would like them to. I would actually like to see this resolved. I think this is like almost one of these fundamental like Bitcoiner questions that goes to the heart of what is the role of the Fed and what recourse do we have, and over what they do, and to what degree are they accountable to us, the people. So that's my kind of recap of what's going on, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, I look forward to you, especially, I mean, from a legal perspective, just paying attention to this stuff. I can see that you're obviously super curious about it. It fascinates me. I don't know if I did. I don't know why I haven't done a deep dive on this yet. Some part of me thinks Trump was looking for anything to get her out of his way. But at the same time, like in looking for anything, sometimes something substantial can be found. Maybe this ends up being that, and maybe it gets justified as such. But yeah, time will tell at this point. We'll see as it plays out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of it too, right? There's obviously this more unseemly political dimension to it, and even a personal dimension to it, which we touched on last time, which is really going after these bureaucrats as individuals and putting them under, and not just I guess trying to fire them, but actually putting them under the microscope of criminal investigation. So this isn't just an academic point. It's not an academic argument that's going on here. it's going to be, I think, an emotional one, and a politically disruptive one. But from a pure like legal nerd's point of view, I've kind of got an interest in how this turns out.
Yeah, another thing, you've mentioned this earlier. We were talking about it when Trump had that mimetic moment with Powell at the, I think it was the new buildings that the Fed are building, and he was talking about pointing to some line item saying the building cost this much, and Powell pushing back, being like, "We built that building like 2 years ago, bro. Like, what are we talking about?" You said something kind of very profound. You said it half jokingly, I think, but you're like, yeah, like people talk about ending the Fed and all this stuff, but like it's not just like a clean thing where someone's going to press a button. Like it's going to look messy and crazy, kind of like this. And I think that's really what this is. I think what you're going to see is President Trump test the boundaries of like things in my opinion, bad and good ways. There's a little bit of both, but we're going to see these things get tested. He's looking to get certain people out of his way. And it's like, on some level, I guess like eliminating bureaucracy is very difficult. Bureaucracies are very thick and sticky and difficult to sort of get through. People like Trump because he's willing to sort of do this stuff, I guess, like play in the mud, so to speak, or like do this. So there's like a certain part of me that's like, yeah, let's see let's test this out. Another part of me, it's always like, you always got to be careful of people abusing power and all this kind of stuff. And, that's what this could, I don't know, more turn out to be. But like you said, keep an eye on it, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. The one other interesting thing, I think, just from a purely political angle, is increasingly, I'm not even sure if there's much of a disagreement on the facts, like not a partisan disagreement. Like, this is a generalization, but from what I can see, this is like how I would kind of characterize the two sides. One of the sides is saying, "How dare you break these norms? How dare you how dare you attack, the independence of this institution? This is unprecedented. Nobody's done this in a century." And so it's a kind of an appeal to. What's so ironic is this is the Progressive Party, but it's almost an appeal. It's a conservative appeal to tradition, right?
Yeah.
But on the other side, there's no disagreement. Like on the other side is saying, yeah, you're exactly right. Like we are attacking these norms. It's good. Yep. Like it's unprecedented, and that's good. Like we want to stress test this for the first time. It's about time somebody did this. So, a kind of an interesting dynamic I see playing out there.
No question.
Let's move on to, I guess, another policy story. One that you kind of noted. I think you wrote an article about this during the week. Or a couple of days ago. So what's happening here is a kind of coalition of lots of industry partners, crypto and Bitcoin, called the DeFi Education Fund, has penned this letter to the Senate Agricultural Committee, who are either right now or very soon will be considering and then, I suppose, publishing their version of their portion of the Market Structure Clarity Act legislation in the Senate.
Yep.
And this letter to this committee is very strongly making the case that all of these folks throughout the industry, including not just, I know it's called the DeFi Education Fund. We're not talking just about crypto lobbyists and advocates here, like the Bitcoin Policy Institute kind of signed this letter as well. And this issue is, in fact, a kind of a cardinal one for all of us, which is kind of a very strongly worded letter demanding that this market structure legislation contains within it protections for non-custodial service providers and open source developers as well. And in fact goes so far as to say that, I think as you can see just right up the top here, that we cannot support a market structure bill if it doesn't have any of this stuff, right? And specifically we're talking about, I think, Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, inclusion, and other things as well.
Not just to clarify, it's not the whole Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. It's certain language from it. The whole act is only 2 pages long, so it's actually probably a chunk of it. So it's certain language from the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act about what gets termed non-controlling entities, so non-custodial entities or people building non-custodial tech.
Yep.
They're pushing very hard for this. From people who I've spoken with, It's again a lot of Democrats who want this language out of the bill. The likes of Tom Emmer have been pushing back. This language is the battleground. I just literally the after party I was at, I was in having a deep conversation with Obi Nuasu, who the creator of Fedi, and he's paying very, very close attention to this because Fedi, on some levels, will provide privacy to its users. I was with Uncle Rockstar. He's also paying attention to this. Anybody who's developing in the space, because even if you're working on Lightning, Lightning is a privacy preserving technology. Lightning, if you're not running the node, you're not necessarily seeing what's going through. So even like when you see really cool Lightning reports on what's happening from Breeze or River, they're doing the best they can to sort of like get as much data they can from people who are running nodes and have that data to share. But it's not like a blockchain where you can see everything that's happening on it. So some of this technology, and with Fedi, there'll be mints on that where you can have where you have eCash. Essentially, you have these federated mints, which is also a privacy preserving technology. But it was interesting because Obi was like genuinely paying attention to this and also just genuinely scared of the Tornado Cash and the Samurai stuff. So this stuff is cool. Amanda Tuminelli. If you look her up, I recently did an interview with her for the show that I do, Bitcoin Politics. This again, we've said this on the show, but really, really important that the crypto and Bitcoin space join forces here, because what we're talking about is essentially privacy and P2P transaction rights here, far bigger than just Bitcoin, whether you agree with other digital assets existing or not. It's something that we should all be working together to protect. So this is a landmark letter in that you've never had a letter with this many signatories on the top. This many people, this many institutions / people / advocates have never come together. And I know Amanda Tuminelli is truly a specialist in this kind of stuff, and she's more than happy to lead the charge. Amanda is also the person that did a fireside chat with a member of the DOJ. I'm forgetting his last name. It's Acting Assistant Attorney General Gagliotti. I wrote a piece on this last week, and she sat down with him. She introduced him when he spoke and said, "We're not going after developers anymore," all this stuff. So I trust that Amanda is working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that this was kind of stated loud and clear. My only question with this still is like, what's her leverage? So it's one thing to say like, we don't support it, but like, what does that matter? It's like, okay, well then the bill doesn't get passed and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I get that. Is it a threat to politicians that you're not going to support them in midterms? You're going to pay attention to like who voted on what for this or who was looking to remove the language. And then you're not going to support those politicians. But then I'm also like, well, is that even leverage though? Because my guess is that most Democrats aren't going to support this. And if there are Republicans that don't, then are we just not voting? Are we not giving money to politicians? Like, what does that actually mean? That's my biggest takeaway. So is this symbolic? Is it cool from a symbolic perspective? No question. Great to have this many people on board and seemingly acting in tandem. We all want to see the same outcome here. I think the big question here is, what is the leverage? What does it mean to say you're going to lose our support? I would guess I'm a little bit tired right now. I could maybe think through and maybe figure that out, or reach out to Amanda and figure that out. But I will say that Amanda is insanely smart. I think a Georgetown law graduate, was a criminal defense lawyer for years, and I don't think she would publish this if she didn't think it would matter. So this week I will do my best to dig a little bit deeper and sort of see what's going through her mind and some of the other people who signed this, just to see if there was something, I guess, more substantial in terms of like, or else. What does the or else mean? I'll look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really important question. What is the or else? I think the other question I have is, what really was the impetus for this letter being penned in the first place? Has something happened over the past few weeks? Is there some indication that, perhaps there was support for, or perhaps it seemed like there was maybe a pathway for passage with this language before that may now be at risk or may now be closing, or, has the landscape changed in some way?
I can verify that is the case. People are pushing to have this language taken out. I can't share more than that for now, but from the people I've spoken with, they're pushing to have this taken out. I think everybody's I think it's becoming clear that this is the language that this is the fight right now. No question. Like if I think a lot of people feel like if we lose this fight, we lose way too much. And as you can see, you have 112 advocates signing on to say, yeah, we're going to have this fight with you. I don't know. I think this is what democracy looks like. We all really want this. Don't do it, and we're going to remember that. So again, what we're going to remember that means, don't know. We can remember all we want. If we don't get it passed and we don't get what we want, then it's great. We can remember how bad we did. But hopefully this ends up working out, and the people voting on this will get the message.
One thing I'm wondering, and maybe this is a naive question, but it's not entirely clear to me why the Democrats or anybody else would want to remove this language. Like, what's in it for them? Like, why want to retain the power to go after, whether it's individuals or open source to devs or anything else, especially when it seems to be that what's being communicated is we can get this legislation through as long as it doesn't have the, so it's like there is an openness clearly to having market structure legislation passed. There is an openness to progressing institutional and government acceptance of this industry. So why get caught up on this part of it? And the reason why I say that might be naive is because obviously you can just look at it and say, well, they want to be the bad guys. They want to do the evil thing. But I just, it's hard for me to buy that that's the reason. Like, we want to have the ability to squash little guys. Like, it doesn't.
Nah,
I don't know.
I don't think it's that. I think it's what Jeff Booth, I think, calls, it's the control system. And I think this idea of this non-custodial tech, I think there are a lot of people who just don't believe that there's a right for it to exist. I think there's just a lot of people who think if something is digital, then it needs to be surveilled. It needs to be able to be stopped by the government or by whatever company is the purveyor of the service. I think there's just a fundamental disagreement there, and the argument is always just, what if bad people use it? But I don't even think that they're using that as an argument, like because they have some other intention. I think they really mean it. Like, what if bad people use it? It's like, yeah, sure. But again, like this has been said a billion times, bad people use a lot of different things. It doesn't mean other people don't have, innocent people don't have a right to privacy as well. But I just think that I wrote a piece for Bitcoin Magazine maybe about 5 months ago and just said, like, the privacy battle is going to be really hard. I think Shinobi actually penned like a letter you could send to your Congress people or your representatives that was just like, you could literally just print this out and sign it. But the conversation around privacy is just going to be really difficult. And it comes down to what we've talked about a bunch on this show. It's like, Bitcoin is digital cash for sure. People should be able to use it privacy. But again, like, we've never seen a form of cash that can be transported to North Korea in 2 seconds. And that's a real issue, and it's a real threat. Could be a national security threat. Again, doesn't mean that the privacy shouldn't exist. It's just, I think people are taking that very seriously. I personally don't think it's a matter of trying to squash the little guy. I don't think that. I think they are making examples out of the Roman Storms of the world and the samurai devs of the world, but only because they have this sort of broader thesis that it's just wrong that people have this freedom and this privacy to begin with. So,
yeah. Look, I think that's probably right. Although there is, to kind of preempt the next story that I'm going to jump to, there is another potential influence on this situation. And that is, as has been reported in Politico this week, there is apparently a kind of a counter-revolution brewing amongst the Wall Street lobby to fight back against the seeming, I guess, conquest of Washington by the crypto lobby. Now, I don't know. Like, there's reporting here from 3 journalists. I don't know. Politico, in my view, is kind of on the raggier end of the spectrum at this point in time. But there are a couple of quotes in here. I'll just say this to frame this whole thing. This sounds outrageous. This is how this article opens. The financial world is barreling towards a lobbying civil war in Washington, right? And so the idea is the banks are fighting back. That's the takeaway here in a couple of ways. The article suggests that that the bank groups are, one of the ways this is happening is they're trying to push back against crypto companies getting banking licenses, which is now obviously just kind of in a headlong rush to, applications to the OCC and other places to kind of integrate crypto companies into the banking system. And so there's kind of case being made here that, I can't find the exact point, but they say that. So there's this pushback against banking licenses. Now, there are a couple of quotes here that maybe lend some weight to this, I don't know if I'd call it a civil war, but
Yeah.
I think there's a quote here from Warren Davidson saying that there's a turf war that's been going on for years, and that has been one of the main things that's held up. Let's see if I can control F that. This is a turf war that's been going on for years and frankly prevented us from passing any regulatory clarity until now, says Rep. Warren Davidson. So that lends some credence to the idea that this tension does exist, for sure. And then similarly, there's kind of a couple of quotes from, I think, banking industry folks further on down the article saying, here we go. Christopher Wilson, president and CEO of Independent Bankers Association of Texas. It feels like there's a move to replace us, which sounds a little bit whiny from someone who's leading toughen up, sweetheart. But
Right.
But I suppose if that's a representative view among the banking industry that this is a direct attack, an attempt to replace banks, then it makes sense to me that they're not going to take it lying down.
Of course.
They're going to do something about it, right?
To be honest, if you don't mind if I jump in, I'm surprised
please.
it took this long. I'm surprised when I saw you had this to the agenda for today, I'm like, oh yeah, that's weird that this hasn't happened yet. Like I was looking through the articles, I'm like, it took this long for them to come around. Like these people that have all the power. It probably has something to do with the Genius Act and what stable coins might push to do and what that'll take, what revenue that will take away from banks. But I have a very Eric Voorhees view on this. Like I feel no sympathy for these people. And it's like, you guys have had this regulatory moat. You've had this power over money for so long, and it has caused such stagnation in the system that the system, barely even knows how to adapt because it doesn't have to. And now you have all this technological change happening in the crypto sphere. Banking industry is probably realizing we couldn't even keep up with this thing if we wanted to. Like the technology we're using, these systems and these databases that we have to constantly sort of harmonize and make work together. It's so much harder to do that than just have them on blockchain rails or whatever. But again, mind blowing that they're just waking up. And I think it speaks to just almost, I won't say how lazy they are. It's not that they're lazy. It just speaks to how out of touch maybe they are. Like, were they still thinking crypto was going away sometime soon? Like, that's what went through my head. It's like, okay, but happy again. It's like another fight. Like, let's do it. Like, let's get this going. And let's round one. Like I'm in the front row seat. I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, as I would say this, nothing galvanizes a kind of semi-disparate group of folks whose interests are, halfway aligned more than a common enemy.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right. It's like, why has it taken so long for for the sleeping giant to awaken? But good luck to them, because if they wade into this fight, too late, underprepared, and probably underarmed, then they're going to galvanize everyone even more, including the entire executive branch now.
Yep.
And I can't imagine it going well for them. The other thing is, I couldn't agree more about who is going to be shedding tears for these poor Bankers Association guys crying about, they're trying to replace us. Like, yeah, dude, we've been actually saying that out loud for many years.
For a long time.
That's the explicit stated intention here. So, you're going to have to do better than that rhetorically, if nothing else. And, this goes back to the inception of Bitcoin. Like, this is, rewind the clock to 2008. Like, all these bankers, half of them should have been permanently out of jobs, if not worse, in 2008. And 100%. they weren't. And in fact, they were bailed out by the American taxpayers to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yep.
That, I don't know. But that wound, I don't think it ever actually fully healed.
No,
I
no
really don't.
chance.
There was
Yeah.
never justice. There was
Yep.
never a proper reckoning for that. There was never even the kind of token things that kind of democratic, like small d democratic governments usually do. Like, oh, we're going to do a 400-page report and
Right.
clear the air a little bit and say that we're sorry. Like, none of that stuff ever really happened. A lot of, I think, look, I'm saying this as a somewhat elder millennial, right? It's still a bit of a raw nerve for me, and I imagine you would have been in a similar boat, right? You're a New Yorker, you would have had a front row seat to this.
I remember the protests afterwards, Ducati Park and Occupy Wall Street and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I still think one of my favorite quotes about Bitcoin is Occupy Wall Street with teeth. And it's funny, like when you see Jamie Dimon talk about it, I mean, he recoils. It is like the kryptonite for Jamie Dimon, who's, I think, kind of the epitome of like the big bad banker. Yeah, they're just what's the word? They're sort of unflinching, and they're like, yes, we can get away with murder. Of course, we can get away with murder. We run the world, and this is the fight we're having, and I think for the most part, as you mentioned, we're sort of having it in the open. Bitcoiners, most of them don't mince words. They're like, we don't like you. We're trying to replace you. This is, like, especially the hardcore ones. I was actually with a couple more OG-ish sort of characters, and it was, it's at this event, and it's yeah, again, but I'm all about the sunlight. Let's do this, and let's do it in public. Like, let's air all the dirty laundry. Like, let's fight it out. Let's let it be known who's on what side, and like, let's turn it up. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, July 4, 2026, there's going to be a UFC fight on the front lawn of the White House.
Right.
Like,
right.
Let's add this to the card too, right?
Yep,
let's get it over with.
Yep.
This isn't like, when a company like Uber comes along and introduces some radically disruptive technology to a market, they have to say the right things about, well, we're not trying to put taxi drivers out of work and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's disruptive, but consumers are going to win in the long run, and it's, in some ways you have to be more diplomatic when you as that. But that's not what Bitcoin is. No one in crypto or Bitcoin is having to kind of mealy mouth their way around this. Like, we're coming for you guys. All right. So
that's it.
Let's be clear about that.
Yep.
Moving on, but relatedly, very relatedly in my view, story this week about, let me just make sure we get it on the screen, has been uncovered. This is reported in the Wall Street Journal, that alleged Chinese money launderers are moving hundreds of billions of dollars, as much as $312 billion, through US banks, through the traditional financial system, and it is going to this is money laundered for Mexican drug cartels and other criminals.
The normal cast of characters.
Yeah, exactly. Just the who's who of TradFi. Yep. And I want to point there's a couple of things about this. Firstly, this isn't news. We've talked about this on the show before.
Yep.
Kind of in response to some of the more hysterical claims of potential illicit activity that can occur on public blockchains.
Let's be clear. I mean, that does occur on public blockchain. I'm not here to say that, like, to even make that argument that only good people use it. It'll occur. There's no question. But again, public blockchains are traceable. I mean, yes, there's Tornado Cash and all this kind of stuff, but not everybody's using that. And there's different, it's going to happen. There's no question. And it happens with cash and all this kind of stuff. It's just denying that it happened, like pretending that it doesn't happen otherwise, I think, is the main issue. And it's just like time after time. I mean, it's just like these things with money laundering and banks. This is like, it's 2 or 3 of these major things a year, it feels like. And the major banks, Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, TD Bank, it's all, this isn't like, it's major stuff. And again, it kind of goes back to also what we were talking about. What are the repercussions? Who's going to jail? Like, what? Okay, fines, great, but like, let's compare those fines to the fees that you made from taking this money from these cartels, and then we'll see how much was actually lost in this process.
Yeah, of course, illicit activity happens on public blockchains. It happens on, so there's this kind of equality in the sense that it happens in both worlds, obviously. But there were lawmakers kind of losing their minds about the possibility of like $2 million or something in crypto going to Hamas at some point,
Right.
which may or may not have happened, you know. And here we have, you know, just a totally different scale. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars,
Yep.
and so there's this general point, right? But something else caught my eye in this article, Frank. And so it is this line here. So some of these networks are also involved in crimes like pig butchering scams, quote unquote, pig butchering scams. Have you heard of this? You heard of
Yeah,
pig
it's
butchering
it's a
scams?
term. So this term got used a lot in the wake of the first witness in the tornado cash case. So a pig butchering scam is when you're sort of manipulated into some sort of financial fraud or like a romantic fraud where your money is basically stolen. You're told to sort of maybe send your money to some sort of front. That money then just sort of for a while, maybe you have a fake portfolio and that money's going up in value or something. You get manipulated into sending more and more and more, and then the money just disappears. So like they're broader than that as well, but that's I guess a general overview. But this term, I remember everyone just using it so freely around the Tornado Cash trial. And then I remember, I think it was someone from CoinDesk actually put like a clause in it. It was like, and this is what a pig butchering scam is, as if it's just like the new terminology that everybody
Yeah.
automatically was like totally up to date on. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so here's what's funny about it. I'd actually seen this come up a couple of times looking at some of the bills that have been introduced at the state level
Okay.
and federal level too. I'd seen this term come up, you know, pig butchering here, like enumerating all of the various, you know, bad things that bad guys can do, and like pig butchering is in there. And I never really looked into it, funnily enough, because I actually assumed it was about pigs.
Same here.
I was like, hey, there's some scam going on with the importation of livestock or something. Well, I just never looked into it. But here's the funny thing. This is a crypto scam. That's what they're talking about. Like, this is a government here on the screen. I've got I think the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. As you said, this is in some ways it's a general terminology for financial scams, but the government communication about this is actually honing in on the crypto element here, and in particular how it's described on this kind of communique from California is right. So firstly, what's the actual connection to pig butchering? Well, it's a metaphor. It's kind of an analogy, right? And the idea is you are, I think it even says it here. You are, you know, fattening pigs up before slaughter. It's kind of a graphic kind of an analogy to use here. But so the idea is, as you said, scammers will contact you online, misrepresent who they are, ingratiate themselves with you, you know, become friends with you over sometimes for months or a really long time, and then eventually, get you to send them a bunch of money. And in some ways, it's just a scam. Like people are familiar with this kind of general form of scam. But why am I drawing attention to this kind of pig butchering thing, particularly in the context of that article about the Chinese money laundering, is that this is a crypto scam that or I would say, the types of illicit activities that lawmakers have highlighted specifically in the crypto context. But there's no reason, as clearly we see now, there's no reason why even some of these illicit activities that they themselves are talking about even have to be occurring, quote unquote, on the blockchain.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Like these are scams that are happening anywhere. Any rails that are available will be used, and then the proceeds from which are being laundered through the traditional financial system, right? So these systems are interrelated already. They're interrelated. They're overlapping. Obviously, scammers on ramp and off ramp to and from TradFi all the time at enormous scale. So, to go back to the kind of start of this point, of course, illicit activity happens on public blockchains.
Yeah.
But it's not hermetically sealed there, never has been, and never will be. Like, it doesn't make sense, in my view, to even draw the distinction between the two worlds as kind of different, the same activity is happening in both at the same time from the same individuals.
Yep.
The degree to which there's any more, I guess the synthesis here is, if there's anything new about it, it's just the degree to which maybe law enforcement has recourse to tracking and surveilling. And this goes kind of back to our privacy question. But it's articles like this now in the Wall Street Journal that I think should completely put to bed the idea that there's anything inherently more risky or more illicit about the kinds of crimes that can occur anywhere.
What these systems can facilitate, that the crypto system is more capable of facilitating this or less when we're seeing larger sums actually move through the traditional system. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that doesn't get spoken a lot about, Ludmila Kaslavska, the head of the Open Dialogue Foundation, amazing Bitcoin advocate, does a lot of amazing human rights work, talks about this a lot. She's like, yeah, these things come up a lot. And then this doesn't even get into like large scale real estate deals and other ways that cash things, things where money can flow through and you really can't track it. She kind of often jokingly says, like, Russian oligarchs don't even need crypto. They have other schemes where this stuff works, and it doesn't necessarily, even traditional finance. There's different ways to sort of move this money through different entities without most people knowing, being the wiser. So yeah, it's again, but I don't think the argument is being made in good faith when it comes to crypto stuff. I think most people know this goes on, and maybe some people feel like, well, we have more control over this thing. So once we get around to getting to those bankers, like the Elizabeth Warren sort of like fighting the last fight, just still fighting the fight from 2008. Like once we bring those bankers to justice or something, I would imagine that's literally a thought that still goes through her head, as if something's going to change. And it's like the majority of us, to the point you were making earlier, it's like we've already seen that even with the most heinous crimes, financial crimes, collapsing the global economy in 2008, nobody goes to jail. Maybe you pay some fines at worst, and it just is what it is. So it's like, it's a little bit of this stuff reminds me a little bit of the Democrats being like, we're not voting for any crypto bills because Trump launched a meme coin and profited off of it. Like, okay, great. Like, I agree, he shouldn't have launched a meme coin. It's definitely not my cup of tea. But like at the same time, like, and you guys are going to do nothing about Nancy Pelosi's insider trading. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a different sort of thing, but at the same time, it's like, just get your own house in order before you start commenting on this other stuff. So,
we're never going to support any banking industry regulations because of what happened with Timothy Geithner and AIG in 2009 with the Obama administration. Like, okay,
yeah, that's it.
Well, last thing I want to touch on, and in some ways this is a story that draws the strings together of much of what we've been talking about today, but it is an article in Bitcoin Magazine, or a piece from Lola Leeds, recapping basically the first 200 days of the Trump administration, and kind of grading it a little bit with respect to Bitcoin, and interrogating this question of, I suppose, in Trump's own words, is he making America the crypto capital of the world? What does that mean? What does it look like? Now, it's not a long article, so I suggest folks go and read it. A couple of points in here made, but I think mainly the question I want to put to you, Frank, relates to how the article ends here, which is that basically, the Bitcoin presidency, this is quoting the article now, reading from the article, the Bitcoin presidency may sound great on paper, but in reality, the environment to develop code in the US has never been more hostile. The Trump administration must drastically change course if it aims to actually fulfill its promises to Bitcoin users. What do you make of this?
About this? Yeah. I think Lola is one of the best. I'll start by saying she's one of the best at what she does. She's very good at what she does in terms of being very critical of things. But I often think sometimes she goes a step too far, and I don't think that this was. The points she makes are correct, but she's sort of leaving out. I have to go back and let me just double check something. Like, I don't believe she touches on all the issues that we've been talking about, the money transmission issues, but and it is maybe it is still just as dangerous. And I did an interview with Peter von Valkenburg from Coin Center, and he had a great quote, just said, like, we're surely on the way to becoming the crypto capital of the world when it comes to regulated ETFs, but are we the crypto capital of the world when it comes to P2P rights? And I think that's basically the point she's making here as well. The problem is there's a little bit more at play here, and that's like, running a crypto company in the United States. And all the founders I've spoken with are like, yes, I feel much more comfortable doing that now. And that's from Brian Armstrong to what's his name, Alex Leishman, who runs River. These are conversations where people feel much different. So there's gradients to what Trump has done. This whole code is free speech, really important thing. Obviously, I'm all about this stuff. I talk about it on every episode. And I think her point is great. It's totally good. I think the piece lacked a little bit of context, though. That context being, there some stuff has gotten better. This thing hasn't, though. This is the issue. But I think also what I would add to it is just that I think a lot of people in the know that this is the issue, know that the Trump administration doesn't seem to fulfilling this issue. And there's a lot of reasons why I think that's the case. One, there is some, like I said, certain anxieties. Some of it is just, again, like what Jeff Booth calls the control system. The control system doesn't want to give up control over the people and blah, blah, blah. And then some of it's education. I think it's just like, there were plenty of politicians I've interviewed where I brought up privacy rights and stuff. And it's like, it wasn't just them avoiding the question. Here and there that happened, but it was like, I really don't know enough about it. Like Brian Style, I really like. I think he's a good congressman, pretty stand-up guy. I've been in closed door meetings with him, and I've seen him interviewed by the likes of Eleanor Terra and stuff. And I remember not too long ago asking him about the Tornado Cash and Samurai stuff, maybe, I don't know, maybe mid-year or something like that. And, he's just like, look, I don't really know. Like, I got to do more homework on it. And it wasn't a deflection as much as it was just like, there was a lot of, you have to also remember, there was a lot of talk about SBRs and a lot of other stuff related to Bitcoin. And there is a lot of stuff happening with Bitcoin. And this is one dimension of it. It's extremely important. I would also say that Bitcoin, it loses a lot of its value proposition if people can't use it this way. And I just feel like some of that context is kind of missing. But to Lola's credit, I think Lola is very good at sounding the alarm. And this is an alarm worth sounding for sure. I'm glad we published it. But I'm not simping for Trump. I do think that he does deserve some credit. I do think companies genuinely feel like they're a bit safer here operating in this space. But again, this is the fight. The fight is privacy, and the fight is whether or not we have these rights. And I don't think it's anything that's going to resolve itself anytime soon.
Yeah, well said. I think it's complex, and individual people are going to prioritize different parts of this complicated mess of regulations and laws and guidances and all these types of things that there's this big constellation of little pitched battles. It's, I guess the war metaphor is somewhat played out, but it's like there are lots of different skirmishes all over the map.
Yep. And
you might make the case, you could make the case, as maybe Lola would, not to put words in her mouth, but you might say, hey, if the Bank Secrecy Act and everything else is still at the end of the day going to be kind of, you're going to infect everything that everybody does, and there's not going to be sufficient privacy, and we're all going to be surveilled, then none of these other skirmishes matter in the long run.
Yeah.
Like, you can make that case for sure, and some sympathy for it. But at the same time, this idea that where there's no progress being made at all, I think kind of falls on its face, as you said, when you talk to many of the people involved in them who now feel safer, who now feel like they can do business, who now, don't feel like they're going to get arrested for something they might have 2 years ago, right?
And the reason that matters is because the likes of Paul Graywall are now speaking up about privacy. But I don't think he would have started with that. I think he would have started with like, okay, what is the U.S. government? Okay, you want Genius Act and you want that. He knows he's a business person, right? He's a very good lawyer. He's a business person. He's all this stuff. Sometimes this sort of stuff, it sort of has to happen in maybe, I won't say a certain order, but it tends to happen in a certain order. It's like, okay, like what's the low hanging fruit? What's the easiest thing we can get to? We know that this is going to be the most difficult thing. And again, it without it sort of breaking the way we want it to, it undermines a lot of the value proposition of this space. But I think you also need the people who are going to be I'll say on the inside. It's not my favorite way to put it, but I'm thinking back to like being at the White House for the crypto conference, like who's in that room. So a lot of the people, the Winklevi, you know what I mean? Not that the Winklevi are like massive privacy advocates or something like that, but you need the people in that room to sort of know that other stuff is in order, and maybe that they were a part of certain negotiations with certain things where the government sort of, I don't, got what they wanted. And now the real ones, let's say the people in the room that really care about this stuff, like it's going to be on them. I'm going to bring it up. There's no question. I'm not that I'm not one of these people, but I am obviously, like, I'm close to the administration, and it's stuff that I will continue to bring up in the proper context. So anybody that wants to clip this and tell me next week when I didn't bring it up in the White House press room, quickly enough, it needs to be done in a certain way. I can't really stress enough that a lot of people don't really understand some of these dynamics yet. Should they? Sure. Bitcoin's 16 years old, privacy is a human right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't mean that this is the thing that they're focusing on. So again, worth paying attention to for sure. I'm a little bit of like, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. If we see the people that are closest, that have the most sway, totally fold on this, then yeah, we're in a much worse situation. But I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the letter, to go back to the DeFi Education Fund letter, a lot of very, very powerful people, were people, entities were signatories on that letter. And I think a lot of the people who have a lot of power in this industry got into this for very ideological reasons. And I don't think, just because maybe they've made a lot of money and everything else, I don't think they've fully, maybe in part, maybe, I don't know, maybe the money helps to sort of not look at everything as ideologically anymore. But I think at the end of the day, they sort of know that a lot of the value, even let's say the value of their company as a purveyor of crypto assets or something, that still hinges on people wanting to buy these things because they can use them freely. You know what I mean? There's a little bit more to it than sort of, I think a lot of people think about, and it's fair, because there's a real anxiety around this stuff. As I mentioned, like I spoke with a bunch of developers the last 2 days at the conference, and a lot of them thanked me for covering the Tornado Cash stuff. And there's anxiety. A good friend of mine from South Africa who created Corva, which is a way to send Bitcoin over feature phones, like a Nokia phone. It's a custodial service, and he's nervous. He's worried that now he's going to have charges pressed on him. He followed everything I was doing very closely. And again, it's like, our laws and our regulations tend to be copied and pasted. Legal precedent set here as per court cases can't be copied and pasted, but you have to imagine the world is paying attention. So I get the anxiety, but like, I don't think it's time to sort of like break the glass yet. We might be getting there, but I don't think we're there quite yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess still lots more to come in the near term for us as we kind of get past Labor Day weekend. I think sessions are going to start back up in the Senate and Congress soon.
Yep.
And I suppose the wheels will keep turning. Market structure legislation will progress one way or another, as will other things too. Trump's legal battles with the Federal Reserve, what's going to happen with Jerome Powell. All of this and much more to be covered right here on Capital Gains in the coming weeks, Frank. And I suppose once again, thank you for being here. Especially, I know, as we touched on at the beginning of the show, you are in Hong Kong and have other things to be doing right now, including maybe going to bed. I don't even know what time it is. But thanks to you.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to let the audience know. I'm so happy with how things went at the conference. It's 1:22 a.m. right now, but I'm going back out to party after this. I don't drink, so I think that helps.
There we go.
Bit, so.
Yeah. Well, say hi to everyone.
Will do.
And thanks, folks, for tuning in once more. We will see you back here next week on time, as per usual. And for now, that is it from us.
Take it easy, everybody.